Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the articles that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 7 important articles for a detailed analysis. We have 4 important columns that are very relevant for the mains exam and 3 small articles that are important for the prelims examination. So just stay with me for the next 1 hour. I promise to analyze the newspaper comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking this initiative, do let me know in the comments. Don't forget to press the like button and please subscribe to our channel. Because going forward, we have many exciting initiatives coming up. For example, this Sunday on April 28th, we are holding Unacademy Manzil 2024, a mega UPSC event where we are going to felicitate the 2023 UPSC CSE toppers. Also, there will be some big announcements for 2025 aspirants which could help you in your preparation. So do attend this session, do join us live. The session will begin at 1 p.m. on April 28th and it will be live on the UPSC Unstoppables YouTube channel. The link is provided in the video description or just visit the homepage of our YouTube channel and you can find the link for this video. Then coming to Conquer Prelims, the free crash course which is going on to help you prepare for the upcoming prelims. Today we have the 6th session of Indian Polity by Sarmad Mehraj sir. This would be the last class for Polity and from tomorrow economy classes will begin where Shyam sir will be discussing the most important static topics that you need to cover for the upcoming prelims exam. The link for the session is available on our Telegram channel. Please scan the QR code or search for Unacademy IAS English on Telegram. And at 6 p.m., the link will be shared with you through which you can access these classes. So please take a look at the next part of Conquer Prelims. After Polity classes end today, from tomorrow, the economy classes will begin and you can take a look at the other subjects as well. So this program, the static phase of Conquer Prelims, it will continue till 7th of June. And the current affairs part of the crash course will begin very soon from 1st of May, right here on our YouTube channel. And finally, the last announcement, there is a special series going on the Unacademy app where I'm discussing the role of geography and how it influences geopolitics. We've already had 2 sessions. We have 5 more classes to go. So every day at 1 p.m. we are conducting these sessions and you can find the link for these classes in the video description below. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu by looking at this important column from page number 8. This article is evaluating a very important government scheme, which is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Now that it is election season, the Hindu is carrying out an analysis of some important government schemes to rate the performance of the current government. So one important welfare scheme and development scheme of the Modi government is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. This has been a flagship program of the Modi government ever since Prime Minister announced a mission, Housing for All mission, by 2022. This commitment was made by the government 9 years ago in 2015. It was in 2015 that Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana was launched and it has 2 separate components. There is a rural component and there is a urban component. Essentially, the goal is to build houses and provide for affordable housing so that the economically weaker sections, particularly those who are below the poverty line, they could benefit from the scheme and ensure that houses are available to all the households in the country. With this ambition, the Modi government launched the mission Housing for All by 2022. The goal was to build more than 2 crore houses and assist in the construction of more than 2 crore houses by 2022 so that housing can be provided to all sections of the society. So the program has been implemented in two separate components. There is a rural component and there is a urban component. Now, if you look at the history of this government scheme, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana has a background to it. In fact, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, launched in 2015, was an upgraded version of the Indira Awas Yojana that was launched in 1980s by the then Rajiv Gandhi government. Because by 1970s itself, it was very evident that India was dealing with a massive housing problem. Especially the poor households, they weren't able to afford housing, be it in urban areas or even in rural areas. As a result, the migrant workers who would come from rural areas towards urban areas, they would largely settle in slums, thus increasing the slum areas and slum habitations in our cities. And as you know, in slum habitations in cities, you don't have basic services available, from water to electricity to sanitation. This would further affect the welfare of these people, of the migrant workers in particular. And the ever-growing slum population posed a developmental challenge for India. So in 1980s, under Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, Indira Awas Yojana was launched to provide housing for the poor households. So over the decades, this scheme has been implemented by subsequent governments, and the Modi government further upgraded this initiative by launching Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana in 2015. A goal was given, housing for all, by 2022. So let us understand the key pillars of this scheme. Let's understand the key objectives. Let's talk about its implementation. Where do we stand today as far as housing for all is concerned? So let's carry out a critical analysis of the implementation and execution of this important scheme. The first point you need to note down is that Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is a centrally sponsored scheme. A centrally sponsored scheme is a government scheme which is funded jointly by the center and the state governments. The funding is basically divided between the center and the states. There is a certain ratio according to which the union government will provide part of the funds. The state governments are supposed to bring in the rest of the funds. So such schemes which are jointly financed by the center and the states, they are called centrally sponsored schemes. And usually it is the state governments which implement these centrally sponsored schemes. The other category of government schemes, they fall under central sector schemes. When we say central sector schemes, they are 100% funded by the center and implemented by the center. A central sector scheme is 100% funded by the union government and implemented by the central government. Now, can you give me any example of a central sector scheme? Mention that in the comment section below. So when we say centrally sponsored scheme, it means that both center and states are jointly financing this particular government scheme and state governments will be implementing it. So under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, there are few priorities that were identified. One priority is to rehabilitate slum dwellers in cities and urban areas. So this would require coordination between the central government, the state governments, and the city corporations and municipal local bodies. All the three tiers of governance would play a critical role in driving this mission. The goal was to rehabilitate the slum dwellers and ensure that proper houses are built to accommodate the slum dwellers in cities. To ensure that affordable housing is made possible, especially in urban areas, by providing credit-linked subsidy. Essentially, let's say there is a poor household, right? They want to build a house, right? And if they apply for this particular scheme, they will get certain benefits. The landowner, right? They will start the construction of the house and part of the funding will come through banks which provide the loans, and there would be a subsidy provided on the interest. this subsidy burden will be borne by the state government and the center. So essentially, these houses that have been built, right, they include funding from the beneficiary as well. The one who is building the house, the one who's supposed to reside in this house, they will also have to make a contribution for this particular project. So if they start the construction of a project and apply for the benefits of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, there would be a lot of benefits. There would be a certain amount of funding provided by the state and the center and a subsidy on the interest on the loan that has been borrowed. So in order to create affordable housing, the scheme talks about partnership between the public and private sector. The private real estate industry is expected to play a big role and assist the local bodies and the governments in creating affordable housing, to construct housing facilities in cities so that the slum dwellers can be accommodated. And it provides support for beneficiaries directly. As I was mentioning, subsidy support is given primarily through interest reduction, right, on the loans that are borrowed by the beneficiaries who are constructing the houses on their own. So there are two types of benefits that are provided. One where the government will work with the private real estate industry to build affordable housing, right, for certain beneficiaries from SC/ST category, certain minority groups and the most backward sections. Some of them might receive free housing as well, but others have the option of starting their own construction and they would get government support, funding from the government and as well as interest subsidies based on the loans that they are borrowing. So this has been the primary objective of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, especially the urban component of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Now let us see how the scheme has performed over the years. Let's understand what has been the status. Did we achieve the goal by 2022? And what is the government planning to do in the coming years? Now, if you look at this infographic that I have shared over here, this data has been taken from the website of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. The government data says that the goal was to build more than 2 crore houses under the urban component of the mission. And the idea was to primarily benefit the economically weaker sections, right? To basically assist the BPL households or below poverty line households. So now I've taken a screenshot from the dashboard created by the government. This is a real-time dashboard which keeps getting updated as the projects are approved, houses are sanctioned and houses are completed. So as per current data, this was taken today morning. So more than 1 crore houses have been built, have been sanctioned and they have been constructed as well. So government data says that more than 1 crore houses have been built under the urban component of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. But clearly it is falling short of the target. The target was to build more than 2 crore houses. Similarly, the rural component also had a very ambitious target of building around 2.9 crore houses to ensure that affordable housing is provided in the rural areas as well. So in both urban and rural components, the government has fallen short of its target. Housing for all was supposed to be achieved by 2022. It has made significant progress. There has been significant progress that has been made, but however, the government has not been able to meet the target. So that is why the Yojana has been extended. The scheme has been extended by 2 more years. Recently, right, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana was extended for 2 more years to allow the government to ensure that the required houses are built, the required projects are sanctioned, and this is where the private sector is playing a big role. The real estate industry has to partner with the public authorities and help in rehabilitation of slum dwellers. So let's look at the key components of this mission. Let's understand what have been the priorities, the goals under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. One important target has been to ensure that a decent living environment is provided to the poor households. Ensure that basic shelter is created for all families in the country, especially for the economically backward sections. Ensure that empty land is effectively utilized, both public land and private land, because land is sufficiently available. Problem is, land prices are unaffordable. A common man cannot afford land at market prices. This is where government has to make an intervention, utilize the available land, especially the vacant lands that are available, and use this for providing housing for all. For example, let's say slum habitations have come up. Maybe slums have encroached on government land. So what the government can do is, it can clear the encroachment, work with the slum dwellers, bring the private industry, build houses or maybe apartments, affordable apartments, and distribute them to the slum dwellers. So that is how vacant land can be effectively utilized, both public and private land. And both public and private authorities and institutions will play a key role. Ensure that economically productive use of government-funded vacant houses is done. You have these various authorities at the city level, right, which are involved in creation of residential areas or in building houses, which are often allotted to the citizens, right? Some prime properties are auctioned as well by these government entities. So ensure that if there are any vacant houses, vacant plots, ensure that it is adequately distributed to the beneficiaries of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. And ensure that in every upcoming project led by the government entities, there should be a separate allocation for economically weaker sections where they will get support under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana to construct their own houses. The goal also has been to strengthen the finances of the municipal bodies. If the local bodies are empowered at the city level, they can utilize the funds to channel assistance towards these projects. They can help the local community, the BPL families, to fund the construction of their houses and promote new investment opportunities and entrepreneurship. Bring in the real estate industry, bring in more capital, private capital, create affordable houses, provide loan and interest subsidy for those who are purchasing these houses so that even low income, middle income families can afford these houses in cities and as well as in rural areas. So these are the primary focus areas of the mission. Now let's look at how the mission has worked. Let's see where does it stand as of today. So as I said, the government says that the Yojana has been a big success, right? More than 1 crore houses have been built. Some numbers say that around 1.9 crore houses have been built. Some numbers say that around 1.1 crore houses have been built. So numbers might vary depending on the quality of the data, but definitely the government scheme has made a huge impact, right? It has provided housing for BPL families across the country. But however, the government has not been able to meet the target. The target was more than 2 crore houses in cities, 2.9 crore houses in rural areas. That target has not been met. So that is why the urban component of the mission has been extended for 2 more years. And there is a big shortage even now in rural and urban housing. Now this can be seen as one of the shortcomings of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. According to the Hindu, in urban settlements in India, there is a shortage of 3 million houses at least. And this number is many times higher in rural areas. Around 20 million houses are missing in rural areas. Now this is a very significant shortage. So clearly the gap has not been plugged by the scheme. So there is still a long way to go to ensure housing for all. And that is what the article is talking about. It's trying to identify some of the loopholes that exist in the scheme, some of the issues in implementation, and it's providing a way forward, a suggestion on how the Yojana can be made better and more effective to ensure that we achieve the goal of housing for all. Now let's quickly identify the problems with the implementation of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. One important issue is that the bigger role given to the private sector. Ideally, social housing, affordable housing, should have been a government-driven initiative. But here, the role given to the private sector could affect the social objective. Because private sector is generally driven by the profit motive, right? Whereas the government alone can focus on the social goals. The government alone can ensure that the poor households get houses and slums are completely rehabilitated. Private sector may not have the right incentive or the right motivation. According to data, in urban areas, if you look at the urban habitations in India, around 40% of the people are living in formal and informal slums. World Bank puts the number at a higher level. Almost it says 49% of India's city population is living in slums. So given the high number of slum dwellers in our cities, it was all the more important for the government to play a direct role in construction of houses. But here the government is providing the finances, at least partly, but it's expecting the private sector to play a bigger role to create affordable housing. So this could be one of the reasons why sufficient houses have not been built on time. And the ones which have been built, they are not affordable. A common man won't be able to afford this even with a loan, even with interest subsidy being provided by the government. So this happens to be one of the shortcomings. Next, the other problem is that these private builders who are recruited by the local bodies to build affordable housing, they end up building these multi-story apartments. Now, slum dwellers are not used to, paying for the basic services, be it electricity, water, sanitation, waste management, right? They don't pay maintenance fees. They can't afford paying maintenance fees. But if you're building these multi-story apartments and distributing them to slum dwellers, and later you expect them to pay for these basic services, right? What happens is that in many cases, they don't even come and occupy these households. To those the apartments have been allotted, they don't even come and settle here. There have been many instances where they rent this out to someone else. They sublet the allotted houses to someone else to make some money out of it. And the prime reason here is this is a deterrent because they won't be able to afford the services and the maintenance cost, which is a recurring cost, a monthly cost. So this is something which has not been taken into consideration. It's a practical challenge. How do you ensure that the beneficiary resides in that household? How do you ensure that beneficiary doesn't rent the house to someone else, right? So how do you ensure that these basic services can be maybe provided at an affordable cost? These are the problems that need to be solved. That is the problem statement here. The building of multi-story apartments and allotting them to slum dwellers and poor households has posed a practical challenge. Next, land is a major issue. Even though there is abundance of land, in prime locations, in cities, land does become a major issue, right? So for constructing houses and for building these affordable apartments, it becomes a challenge for the state government and the local authorities to acquire the required land. Next, the mismatch between a city's master plan and the plans under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Because a city's master plan will have a more long-term vision. Let's say you look at New Delhi, Mumbai or Bengaluru. The concerned local bodies, the city corporations, they would have drafted a long-term master plan regarding the commercial areas, the residential areas, the building standards, etc. Now, there is a mismatch between the master plan of each city and the goals of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the urban component of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So this synergy should have been brought in because the city master plan says something else. But under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, there has been a push given for slum rehabilitation. Now, this may not match exactly with cities' master development plans. So this has also hampered decision making at the ground level. It has hampered the implementation of these housing projects. Now, coming to another problem. As I told you, the government is not giving away free houses here. Apart from few eligible beneficiaries, no one gets free houses under the scheme. The center is only providing a small contribution. States are providing some contribution. Rest of the money, the beneficiary has to bring in. The beneficiary has to take a loan. The government will subsidize the interest. So essentially, the scheme expects the beneficiary to contribute to the construction of the house. Now, how can poor people afford afford the construction of a house, even if it's just a part of it, right? In many cases, they may not be able to bring those funds. If you look at the actual contribution made by the center, it stands at just 25% of the total expenditure incurred on construction of these houses. Around 2 lakh crore rupees has been disbursed by the center. State governments together have brought another 1 lakh crore rupees. The remaining 4 to 5 lakh crore rupees, right, out of the total 8 lakh crore that was expected to be spent, has been brought in by the beneficiaries through loans being taken by the banks. And these loans are subsidized, yes, but the problem is, how can poor people afford the construction of a house? What about landless slum dwellers or landless rural households? Right? You can't expect them to buy plots and then take a loan and build the house with minimal government support. So this has been another flaw with the very structure, the architecture of the scheme. So these are the shortcomings that are identified by the writer of the column. But please understand the other side of the story as well. It's not easy, it's not a joke to build anywhere between 1.1 to 1.9 crore houses. The Yojana has been a big success, right? It has provided affordable housing, but there are shortcomings. Of course, we have not met the target. So you need to look at both sides. It's a critical assessment. So there could be a mains question in GS paper 2 on the topic of housing for all. Also, please understand why housing is important. Connect housing with other basic requirements and necessities, from education to healthcare, to sanitation, clean drinking water, right? These are all important issues related to governance, social issues as well. So you can interconnect all these areas and you can use all these points to write answers across different subjects. Now let's look at the next article. On the same page, we have a column related to India's EV policy that was recently notified. India has recently brought out an updated EV policy, primarily to attract big foreign players into the Indian market. Now first, let's have a small discussion on EVs or electric vehicles. Let's understand what is their significance, what plans does India have with regard to adoption of electric vehicles, where does our domestic market stand, and then we'll talk about the recent changes that have been done with regard to the EV policy. See, electric vehicles, which are powered by batteries essentially, lithium-ion, nickel cobalt batteries, they are clean vehicles. Unlike your fossil fuel-based vehicles, which are driven by internal combustion engines, right? They are basically consuming fossil fuels like petrol and diesel. So this contributes to air pollution, right? Your regular ICE vehicles, they release particulate matter and various hazardous pollutants, from compounds of sulfur, nitrogen to carbon monoxide. They pollute our environment and they also release greenhouse gases. They contribute significantly. Vehicular emissions is a significant contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. So it's contributing to climate change. So the way forward is to shift away from fossil fuel-based transportation and adopt cleaner forms of transportation such as electric vehicles. So one problem here is adoption. How will you push the whole nation, the whole world to move towards a new product, right? So increasing the adoption rate is one challenge. Second is charging infrastructure. Unlike your fossil fuel-based vehicles, right, where you have a wide network of petrol stations, fuel stations, right, where you can easily refuel, electric vehicle adoption, if it has to be done on a mass scale, it requires sufficient charging infrastructure, right? You need to have public charging spaces. Every household, maybe apartments and shopping malls, government buildings, right? They should all have charging facilities. And even key infrastructure facilities like airports and other critical infrastructure, they should have sufficient charging spaces so that electric vehicle adoption can increase. So creating the charging infrastructure is another massive challenge. But more importantly, getting the technology, the battery technology in particular, ensuring that the batteries are safe. EV car is safe, because there have been many incidents, I'm sure many of you would be aware of this, where batteries have exploded, they've caught fire, right, leading to injuries and deaths. So improving the quality, ensuring the safety of the passengers, and mastering the technology, plus procuring the raw materials, the critical minerals that are needed. Lithium is a scarce resource. India doesn't have sufficient lithium reserves. We don't have sufficient nickel and cobalt reserves as well. So most of these minerals they have to be procured from abroad. We'll have to depend on certain countries. And the worst part is that China dominates the supply chains of lithium, nickel and cobalt. So such foreign dependencies could hamper our economy. But India has laid out an ambitious plan to transition towards electric vehicles. There is a national mission for electric mobility. By the end of the decade, India has ambitious plans to largely shift towards a cleaner form of transportation by increasing the production and sale and adoption of electric vehicles. The Niti Aayog has worked out an entire plan to create the required charging infrastructure across the country. Right? Of course, the government has taken the required initiatives. Our domestic automobile manufacturers, be it car manufacturers like Tata, Mahindra and the others, or be it two-wheeler manufacturers from Ola to Ather to the many other companies which are right now pioneering in electric vehicle technology. They've all done their bit. They've brought out local innovation. They've developed indigenous batteries, indigenous vehicle designs. But still, the domestic market is struggling to meet the required demand. Right? The domestic companies still have a long way to go to ensure the safety, efficiency and the adoption of electric vehicles. So in this regard, there are few global companies which have already taken a huge leap ahead. For example, look at Tesla from the US. Right? Tesla has pioneered EV vehicles and it is seen as one of the market leaders. But even more than Tesla, there is a very popular Chinese company. Its EV vehicles are very, very popular. I don't know if you have heard about it. It's called BYD, a very popular EV manufacturer in China. So these companies from other countries have already taken a massive leap compared to Indian automobile manufacturers. So now, what should be the way forward for the government of India? On one hand, of course, we should build domestic capacity. It's always good to be self-sufficient. We don't have to depend on others. So focus, of course, should be on the domestic players. Give any support needed for the domestic industry. So we even had a scheme for this. The government of India had brought out a scheme to subsidize the automobile manufacturers in India to promote innovation in the field of electric vehicles technology. Right? The government is making investments to create the charging infrastructure required. Government and public entities like ISRO and others, right? They are bringing their expertise to develop the battery technology in India. But despite all the efforts, we will still need to depend on some of the foreign companies as well. If we have to increase the adoption of electric vehicles and if we have to make this a viable model for the future, we will need the involvement of established players like Tesla, BYD and others. There should be a fine mix of foreign companies, right, and our domestic players as well. So in this regard, these foreign companies, they were facing a huge hurdle. They were facing a big barrier to enter the Indian market. See, Tesla has been operating from so many years. Its EV vehicles are quite popular already, right? But Tesla doesn't enter the Indian market. You don't find Teslas on the Indian roads, right? The reason was there was a huge import barrier. There was a trade barrier. To protect our domestic industry, India had imposed a very high import duty on assembled electric vehicles. Same with BYD. China's BYD could not enter the Indian market because there was a massive import duty. If assembled EVs have to be brought into India, the import duty would amount to 70 to 100% of the vehicle cost. Let's say a Tesla costs around 1 crore rupees, just as an example, right? So if a fully assembled unit is imported into India by Tesla to be sold in the Indian market, then the duty on this would be 70 to 100%, meaning the car's price would jump to almost 2 crore rupees, which essentially makes it unaffordable, it's unviable, no one will buy that, right? And the company neither would be interested to enter the Indian market. The idea was to prevent these companies from coming to India. That's why the import duty was kept very high. But now with realization that we need to boost domestic manufacturing, right? Doesn't matter whether it's an Indian company or a foreign company. How about we create a model, an incentive model to attract these foreign companies to bring Tesla, BYD to India, right? And other top EV manufacturers to India and push them to focus on domestic manufacturing. Bring their technology and ask them to produce vehicles here to create the ecosystem needed while allowing them some incentives. So driven by this vision, the Modi government has taken a very big step. Recently in March, the new EV policy was notified, through which the taxes have been brought down, the duties, they have been brought down to just around 15%. Is that clear? From an import rate of 70 to 100% for completely built units, assembled cars, the rate has been brought down to just 15%, which basically creates an easy opening for companies like Tesla to enter the Indian market. You might have read reports that Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla, was supposed to visit India. He himself tweeted on his platform X that he is visiting India soon to meet Prime Minister Modi. At the last minute, the visit has been postponed due to various reasons. But that essentially shows that Tesla is interested in the Indian market. Tesla knows that India's market could be massive. And now with government support and a friendly policy from the government, these companies are very much interested to enter the Indian market. So let's see what policy changes have been done. How does this help the entry of the foreign players into our EV market? And what will happen to our domestic companies? Right? What do they have to say about this policy, which might allow foreign players into the Indian market? So essentially, this is a carrot and stick policy. It's not that we are giving incentives to these companies without any conditions. There are certain conditions for them to enter the Indian market. The government has said that you can directly import your vehicles into India. We will reduce the import duty to just 15% so that you can compete in the Indian market. But however, there is a limit. There is a limit on the number of cars that these companies can import into India. All right, what is the limit? Let's see. The limit is maximum of 40,000 vehicles. And there is a per year limit as well. In a single year, they can import just 8,000 units. So let's say Tesla can bring only 8,000 fully assembled cars into India in a given year. So this is done over a period of 5 years. So maximum it can bring to India is 40,000 cars, not more than that. All right. There is one more condition, which is very, very important. If the company should be allowed to import at these rates and sell those cars in India, the condition is that the company should invest in domestic manufacturing. It has to invest in localization and build domestic manufacturing facilities in India. Within 3 years of entering the Indian market, it has to set up domestic manufacturing capacity. So local factories have to be set up, the core technology has to be brought in, Indian workers will have to be employed. So it will not only create jobs in the Indian market, it will drive the EV ecosystem in India. Right? It will bring their expertise and technology, and it will actually be a big boost for domestic manufacturing of EV vehicles. So localization has been mandated under the new EV policy. Specific targets have been given. Within a given number of years, a certain amount of localization has to be done by these companies. For example, within 3 years, right, they should not only establish a domestic manufacturing plant, but 25% of the production should happen in India. 25% of the components should be sourced locally from the Indian domestic market. So this would benefit the broader EV market. Then within 5 years, right, within 5 years, 50% localization has to be provided. At least half of the components assembly should happen in India, in their manufacturing plant located in our country. So by then, they are allowed to import 40,000 EVs, sell them in the Indian market and make profits as well. So this is a win-win situation. It will benefit these companies to break into the Indian market. It will help India to widen its EV production, build the domestic ecosystem needed, create jobs in the Indian market. So that is why the policy has been widely appreciated by many experts. But however, the domestic companies in India, they have expressed concerns. In fact, some of them have even opposed these changes that have been done by the Modi government. So domestic players like, let's say, Tata, Mahindra, Maruti, Suzuki, and others, right, even two-wheeler manufacturers, some of them are apprehensive about the policy because obviously now they will have to compete with the foreign companies. Of course, there will be enough space for them to compete with regard to the price point, right, with regard to efficiency, suitability for the Indian market. This is what will drive innovation actually. The competition will trigger more innovation. It will push the Indian companies to innovate. It will actually help in bringing out more efficient technologies, and eventually it will benefit the customer, right? It will help achieve our goal, our climate goal, which is to reduce our vehicular emissions and shift towards electric vehicles. But of course, there are concerns being expressed by the domestic industry. Some of them have opposed the policy as well. So what is the way forward? What should India do with regard to EV production and EV adoption? See, first of all, the government should provide some incentives to the domestic manufacturing sector as well. It did provide incentives under the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan. A specific fund was created to incentivize innovation in India's domestic companies. This incentive support should be scaled up, right? Next, we need to secure the required resources. We need to work with few friendly countries like Australia. There are few South American countries like Argentina, Bolivia and others, right? They have enough lithium reserves. There are few African countries blessed with nickel and cobalt reserves. So India is already working on this. So a public sector unit called Kabil has been established to scout for these strategic minerals and critical minerals and secure the supply of these minerals to India at a reasonable cost. While reducing dependency on China, right, we are looking to diversify the sourcing of these critical raw materials. So that is one aspect which we should focus upon. Next, it's about spreading awareness amongst the consumers, giving incentives to the customer as well to make a switch towards EVs. Right now, there is still hesitation about adopting EVs because they are expensive. The technology is not well tested out. There are concerns about its charging potential, mileage, safety risk, as I told you, fire accidents. So there is a need to ensure that the product is of the highest quality and spread awareness for the customers, attract them towards the EV market, incentivize them to buy EVs, switch from fossil fuel vehicles to EVs. So there should be some incentive for them. Let's say the old cars can be bought at a higher price before they are pushed into the junkyards, right? Maybe there could be an incentive given, or maybe in the loans which customers are going to take for buying a new EV, there could be subsidies, interest rate could be brought down, or registration rates or taxation rates, road tax can be brought down. So something like that. Incentives for the customers to spread awareness, to increase adoption. And finally, charging infrastructure. Ensure that there is adequate charging infrastructure. So foreign participation is necessary, right, with checks and balances. Foreign participation will actually bring more competition in the Indian market. It will push the domestic companies in India to further innovate. So in the long run, India is all set to transition towards electric vehicles. So please make a note of all these key points. You could get a direct mains question. Next, we have an editorial on page number 6. This editorial is related to a petition that was filed at the Supreme Court by a group of civil society activists. A group of civil society activists led by Aruna Roy, a very popular civil society figure. They have approached the Supreme Court and they have filed a petition regarding the restrictions that are imposed during elections. When elections are being held, there are a number of restrictions that are brought in to ensure the smooth conduct of the elections, to ensure that there is no violence, no disruption, no law and order situation which can disrupt the electoral process. There are certain restrictions that are brought in, right, which in a way could restrict your basic rights. Now, for example, once elections are notified, once the model code of conduct kicks in, there is a tendency amongst government officials, right, to place restrictions on public rallies, on protests, or even on any campaign. They don't give permissions, right, when civil society groups are trying to spread awareness, when they are trying to raise questions through their right of freedom of speech and expression. See, restrictions are there on political parties as well and candidates as well. Apart from that, there are in general restrictions on protests, rallies and campaigns. Now, let's say you approach the local authorities asking permission to take out a rally and protest against a particular issue. The authorities will deny you the permission. This is a norm. It's become a trend, right? Now, the bureaucracy would be directly under the superintendence of the Election Commission of India. So, Election Commission, of course, is rightly worried about the security and law and order situation. But this pushes the government officials to be extra cautious, and even without a valid reason, they don't give permissions for any protests, rallies or campaigns during the election period. So now the petitioners are questioning that these restrictions that are being placed on civil society organizations, on conducting any kind of protest, rally or campaign, this is a violation of your fundamental right under Article 19. That's the question they have raised at the Supreme Court. They've asked the Supreme Court to look into the constitutional validity of restricting the right to protest, the right to express. Usually what happens is that under Section 144 of the CRPC, the executive magistrate, the IAS officer for district, the DC essentially, right, and even the police, they will deny permission for any rally, any protest or campaign by imposing Section 144. Section 144 curbs such events, right, keeping in mind the law and order situation. But quite often it is blatantly used in every circumstance. Even without a valid reason or justification, Section 144 is frequently imposed by the government machinery. And especially during elections, the officials become extra cautious. They don't allow any protests, rallies or campaigns to be held. Now imagine, what if there is a NGO or a civil society group, they want to spread awareness about elections. They want to encourage the voters to come out and vote. Such campaigns may not be allowed. Or let's say candidates would have filed their nomination, they would have brought all their financial details into the public domain. Let's say there is an NGO or a civil society organization which wants to shed light on the financial wealth of these candidates. Let's say it wants to highlight the discrepancies with the wealth declared by the candidates and the actual wealth that they possess. This is actually helpful for the voters to help them make an informed choice. But any such campaigns or rallies or protests will not be allowed usually by imposing Section 144. So what is Section 144? Section 144 of the Criminal Procedure Code provides an extraordinary power to the executive magistrate. The executive magistrate can prohibit any unlawful assembly. Any assembly of more than 4 people is considered as unlawful. Is that clear? 4 or more people. If they are assembling in a given area where Section 144 has been imposed, the police can take action against you. They can arrest those people, right? This can be labeled as an unlawful assembly with an attempt to engage in riots. Let's say you have just met to raise a certain issue, or let's say you want to educate the voters. A group of people are leading a rally, right? When Section 144 is in place, those people can be arrested for unlawful assembly and charged with provisions related to rioting. So it is an extraordinary provision. It is meant to help the authorities, to help the police and the district administration to contain law and order situation, to deal with possible emergencies that might come up. But it is quite frequently used by the administration, and especially during elections, permissions are denied by citing Section 144. So that is why a group of civil society activists have approached the Supreme Court, filed a case against this, and they are urging the court to look into the constitutional validity of these restrictions. So let's see what the court will say, and that's what we need to understand. Next, another article from page number 7 related to governance. The article is focused on the massive income inequality in India. right? In India, there is a huge income divide, which was even recently brought out by a report. The World Inequality Lab recently brought out a report which even went viral. It was titled The Rise of Billionaire Raj in India. It used various metrics over the last 3 decades, during which India has witnessed tremendous growth from 1990s to 2023, right? And it even went back to the colonial period. It went back to the post-independence and pre-independence era as well. And special focus was paid to the period after 1990s. That is after India initiated the economic reforms. So by drawing on data from the last 90 to 100 years, World Inequality Lab and a team of researchers, they brought out this report titled The Rise of Billionaire Raj. So they have assessed the divide between the rich and the poor during the British period, that is prior to independence, immediately after independence, and how inequality has further increased after the economic reforms of 1990s. This is the comparative analysis that the report provides. Now, according to this report, which gained a lot of traction, the top 1% of the wealthy individuals in India, they own most of the national wealth, national resources, and national income. Now, this is a matter of grave concern. According to the report, 22.6% of India's national income went to just the top 1% of high net worth individuals. Then look at the next data. The top 0.1% of India's population, they earned nearly 10% of the national income in the country. This clearly shows how the rich have been getting richer and the poor and the lower classes remain where they are, and the situation has even worsened. The gap has widened even further. According to the report, the share of the top 1% in the national income is among the highest in the world. So essentially, India is staring at a massive inequality problem. The bottom line is that there is a huge income divide with regard to the kind of income or money that we are making in a given year. There is a huge wealth divide. The overall wealth that an individual is building, right? Be it their investments, all the assets that they own. Even with regard to wealth accumulation, there is a massive divide between the rich and the poor. So what we are witnessing is a concentration of wealth. A concentration of wealth in the hands of the top 1% of the population. Now, this is quite alarming. According to the report, the divide is much more than the divide that existed during the British Raj. So this represents the state of the Indian economy. Of course, the government of India has dismissed the report. It has even criticized the report as well, saying that the methodology itself is flawed. But there are many other corroborative articles and research papers that does highlight that India suffers from a massive inequality problem. Let's assume that these numbers are false, right? But it is a fact that there exists a very wide income divide, wealth gap, and concentration of wealth in India. It's on par with few other emerging economies like South Africa, Brazil, which also report very high levels of income divide. Now, such an income divide could be a huge threat, a risk to the economy itself. First of all, it shows that the poor people, the lower classes are suffering. They're not able to get the basic facilities. They're not able to improve their standard of living, right? And poverty is a vicious cycle. Those who are poor, they can't afford good education. Without good education, you don't get jobs, right? Without good income, you can't take care of your health. Your nutrition suffers, right? And you end up spending more on your health as you suffer from diseases. The whole family is pushed into this vicious cycle of poverty. It's a never-ending cycle. So breaking that cycle is the purpose of growth and development. Now in India, India has seen enormous growth post-1990s. There is no doubt about this. India has registered fantastic growth numbers in the last 30 odd years. Ever since the economic reforms of 1991-92, right? India opened up the economy, liberalized the markets, globalized the economy, right? We brought in private capital, foreign investments, and India has grown at a massive rate. India has been one of the fastest growing economies over the last 3 decades. Especially in the recent times, right? Even when the global economy is going through a depression, India has been a bright spot, the lone bright spot, registering very significant growth. But growth alone does not translate into development. This is the important point that you need to understand. See, Indian economy has grown. We have been one of the fastest growing economies. Right from 1990s to 2010, India registered tremendous growth. Again, from 2014 till now, the last 10 years, India has seen fantastic growth even when the global economy was facing multiple challenges. But growth doesn't translate into genuine grassroots development. The situation for the poor people has not really improved. Many studies show that it might have worsened. The gap, the divide might have increased. Now, if you look at the Constitution of India, under the directive principles, there is a directive principle which mandates the state to prevent concentration of wealth. Please find out which article is this and mention that in the comments below. So it shows that the state has failed. It has failed in fulfilling this mandate. It has failed in preventing the concentration of wealth. So the benefits of development, the benefits of growth, it's not trickling down to the lower sections of the society. Our expenditure on education, on science and technology, on health, on infrastructure, on housing is still very, very limited. And that is the concern that the writers are pointing out. The writers are saying that if you look at India's human development, right, we still rank at one of the lowest levels when compared to other countries. The Human Development Report, which is brought out by the UNDP, UN Development Program, it ranks India at the 134th position out of 193 countries. So that shows that India still has a lot to do when it comes to basic governance, basic development, be it education, healthcare, standard of living, right? These basic necessities are yet to be fulfilled. So the lower classes, the poor people, the masses in general, right? They have not received the full benefits of development. Of course, we have lifted millions of people out of poverty, right? India's lower classes, middle class, and the upper classes, upper middle classes, they have benefited. There is no doubt about it. But still, we have millions of people who are yet to receive the benefits of the growth and development that we have seen in the last 30 years. Growth has to be inclusive. It has to take all sections of the society together. But in India, the growth story has been skewed in favor of the rich. The rich have gotten richer without the poor receiving adequate benefits of development. So this skewed development, which is not inclusive, could weaken the economy and it could pose a threat to the very stability of the society as well. So that is a concern the writers are flagging, and they're urging the government to focus on human development, focus on basic grassroots development, ensure that there is distribution of wealth. So that is what we learn from this important article. Now let's look at the prelim section. We have few small articles, and after that we can wrap up the session. Look at this article on page number 1. It's referring to the Advertising Standards Council of India. The article is dealing with misleading advertisements. If you remember, recently we discussed how several FMCG companies and food processing companies, right, they have been selling products which are not actually healthy, branding them as healthy products and misleading the customers. We spoke about Nestlé's baby food. We spoke about Cadbury's Bonvita and many other products. Right? This has been a topic in news because FSSAI, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, has been acting against these misleading advertisements where non-healthy food is being sold, branded and marketed as healthy foods. So that is one issue which has been in news. The matter has reached the court as well. The other issue is with another controversial company, that is Patanjali, owned by Baba Ramdev. Patanjali has been known for selling these questionable products, claiming to have superior health benefits, claiming to be rooted in Ayurveda and science, It has sold nothing but fraudulent products, and now the lid is being blown by the Supreme Court itself. Patanjali has been made to apologize, and it has been penalized by the Supreme Court as well. It has condemned the misleading advertisements of Patanjali, how it has misled Indians to believe in fake drugs and fake treatments which have no therapeutic value. So the question here is misleading advertisements. So who regulates misleading ads? The answer is the Advertising Standards Council of India. So there can be a prelims question. Because of the topic of misleading advertisements, there could be a straightforward question on Advertising Standards Council of India. So let's look at the basic facts. The Advertising Standards Council of India is a self-regulating body of the advertising industry. It was established in 1985. It's a non-profit voluntary organization established under the Companies Act. So all the media outlets and advertising firms in the country, they have formed an industry-level self-regulatory body, which is ASCI. So essentially, it self-regulates the advertising industry in the country. It has brought out few guidelines that advertisers need to follow, that companies are supposed to follow. It has established few basic regulations to prevent misleading advertisements and objectionable advertisements. These guidelines apply for all the communication sectors, from print media to television to even internet-based marketing, SMS-based marketing. So any channel of advertisement, any channel of marketing gets covered under the mandate of the ASCI. It's a voluntary non-profit organization, a self-regulatory institution of the advertising industry. All right. So it has done some great work in regulating advertisements, and you should know some basic details about this institution. Next, on page 14, there's an article related to a report, a periodic report which is brought out by the RBI. It's called the State of the Economy Report. The Reserve Bank of India publishes a periodic report called State of the Economy Report. Now, the findings of the report is not too important. It's something we have been discussing repeatedly. But just knowing that this report is published by RBI, right, is very important for prelims. This report basically paints the macroeconomic picture, the status of the Indian economy. It talks about inflation level. It talks about the risks, both domestic and external risk factors to the Indian economy. It provides a broad picture of all the concerns that could, affect the Indian economy. So in this edition of the report, the State of the Economy Report, RBI has flagged few important risk factors. One would be geopolitical tensions, the ongoing wars and conflicts in West Asia, in East Europe, etc. The other risk factor could be climate change, extreme weather events, adverse rainfall, drought, floods, etc. So these events have been flagged as a major risk for the Indian economy. Failure of Indian monsoons, or excessive rainfall during monsoons causing floods and other extreme weather events. So climate risk essentially has been flagged as a major concern, along with geopolitical tensions. So please know that this report is published periodically by the RBI, State of the Economy Report. Now please find out, how periodically is it published? Is it published every year or every month? Let me know in the comments. This is a small assignment, a small homework for you. Coming to the last article for today. On the same page, on page 13, there's an article referring to NABARD and green financing. NABARD has unveiled a new strategy to mobilize funds for green financing. So let's understand, what is NABARD, what is green financing. So first, let me talk about green financing, and then we'll discuss the basic facts about NABARD. Green financing is about raising capital or arranging the required capital for climate-friendly initiatives. So it could be renewable energy projects, it could be sustainable development projects, it could be projects which can reduce emissions, projects which could lead to environment conservation, biodiversity protection. So any such project which can reduce pollution, reduce emissions, lead to conservation of the environment, they are climate initiatives or climate related projects. So raising finance for those projects, providing funding or capital for those projects is green financing. So green financing is provided by banks, developmental organizations, and institutions like NABARD. Now, NABARD has launched a new green financing initiative called Climate Strategy 2030. Write this down as well. UPSC might ask you, Climate Strategy 2030 is a green financing initiative launched by which institution? Answer is NABARD. So under the Climate Strategy 2030, NABARD is looking to prioritize green financing, meaning it will provide more loans, priority loans for climate related projects. So NABARD stands for the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development. It was established mainly to streamline agriculture finance and rural finance. It was established based on the recommendations of the B. Shivraman Committee, which was established by the RBI to study agricultural credit and rural development in the country. RBI wanted to know how we can streamline loans and credit in the rural markets to drive rural development, infrastructure creation in rural areas, and to assist Indian agriculture. So the B. Shivraman Committee provided recommendations which led to the establishment of NABARD. The committee called for a dedicated institution to look after agricultural credit and rural development. So based on these recommendations, the NABARD Act was passed by the Parliament in 1981, and accordingly NABARD was established in 1982. So since then, it has been fully owned by the Government of India, and it functions as the lead banking institution in rural areas to drive agricultural credit, to provide loans for rural development projects. So its primary function is to supervise the RRBs, the regional rural banks, the cooperative banks, streamline their credit approach and ensure that farmers and rural investors, rural entrepreneurs are benefited. To finance such public initiatives, right, government-backed initiatives, and arrange the required capital for these key projects. So that is the purpose of NABARD. It finances rural development, rural infrastructure, agricultural credit. This is the purpose of NABARD. So on this note, I would like to conclude the discussion for today. These are the practice questions. They are based on the two articles that we studied earlier. So please use those points, use the same structure as well, and write an answer to these questions and post the answers in the comment section below. So that is it for today. I hope you guys have liked the session. If you did, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.